Okay, so here is the first puddle. And this is, as you might expect at this moment, a visioning puddle, a future-oriented puddle. And it starts off kind of far away from where we're going to end up. So what do you see as your strengths, our strengths? What is your own vision for this time? What collective vision do we hold? And here's a little bit more precisely what the question is. Those are just background. There are two more precise questions. What is the best scenario you hope for, and how are you aiming to make that happen? That's a Joni question. And this is a Susie and Beth question that I'm going to say, and then I'm going to ask them to clarify if there's any need. Describe the world you would like to see if we managed to cross this threshold. What would we want to find on the other side of this process of change? What could we hope to find on the other side of this process of change, a vision of that? Any clarification there?
Maybe only just to say that Susie has me convinced that if we're going to invite others into this work, the more specific and vivid our picture of what's waiting for us on the other side, the more powerful. And I sense we spend a lot of our time in the here and now, in the what's wrong and broken, in the what we might do to fix it, and not so much on what's the destination or the next way station.
So let me review these, because there are a couple of nuances in how you might want to respond. What is your own vision for this time? That seems to be more, how can we be helpful right now as we go through this transformation? What collective vision do we hold? Seems to be more related to this future that we might be able to, we hope to be able to move toward. What is the best scenario you hope for, and how are you aiming to make that happen? Or describe the world you would like to see if we manage to cross this threshold. What would we find? What would we want to find on the other side? What would be our vision of what's possible? It's asking a lot of you to think about which question you want to actually address, but they're all obviously in some ways.
I'm sorry, you've reworded several of them. Could you give us three? That's what you want us to do, is three, right?
No, just one.
Oh, just one?
Just choose one.
Can I start?
Yes.
I've been thinking a lot about buildings and architecture and how, for a long time now, the race has been the tallest building, these really phallic things poking as sort of a monument to man's greatness. And my vision is more of an architecture that disappears into the land, that acknowledges our symbiotic relationship and humbles ourselves rather than tries to tout an ego or some accomplishment. I'll just start there. Anybody? I can talk a little bit about equity. And I do feel like until we are able to really look at each other in all of our difference, whether it's physical or geography, and know that we are related, and treat each other as better than our treat our family. To really become an equitable and understand that we are all in this as one. There is, one of the most amazing things that happened when I walked across the frozen sea in Alaska was understanding that the ridiculousness of border, of race and religion and even language. I don't understand why we still hold so tight to these invisible things. So I would like to see a more just, equitable world. And I don't think that we will ever be able to be equitable with nature and our environment and rivers and oceans until we can do that with ourselves. How do we construct that? And when I look at my own family tree, and all of its diversity and complexity, I say, well, we've already started. It's been in process for a long time. We just have to acknowledge that we all share the same DNA. We all have one mother, and I don't mean Earth. Whoever Lucy or whatever primate that was.
So I've been struck by the number of times we've said that education is very, very fundamental to this in children. So, and we've talked of the great turning. I think that comes from blocking on her name. Joanna was a Wellesley alum, right? Joanna Macy, of course. But what if we came out of it and looked back and said, that was the time of the great learning. That was the time when all of these unimagined and unimaginable challenges beset us, and we had terrible tragedies and profound loss and sadness. And instead of turning against each other and fighting for the very last scraps, we realized that we had to relearn what our place was in the long sweep of geological time, in the biological system of expanding and contracting and culling, and we saw finally the mistake that we had made by believing that we were separate and special and other and over the rest of the living world. We saw it, we learned from it, we learned from the rest of the world, and we began to rebuild with humility, understanding that if we lost the ability to love, then there was no point in going on. And then we loved, and we laughed, and we played, and we celebrated, and we improvised step by step. And look at what we made.
It's a really hard question, but I don't know, I keep coming back to something that my sixth grade English teacher taught us about how thinking about man's struggles and the great literature. She broke it down, of course, into, and correct me, I'm sure this has all been revised, but man against man, man against nature, man against himself. And I think we're in this, we're transitioning from man against man to man against nature, and now we have to go back to man against himself. And so if we can turn this ship or transition while struggling with our struggle against ourselves, I think our values are going to change. I think our values, they have to change if we're going to have a bright future in this. And the value is going to be having less and giving more in the most basic sense, requiring less, giving more, walking lightly and carrying a big heart or a big stick of bread, just changing that whole mantra from conflict into harmony with nature. And so I think that is so possible because when you just encounter people in nature, and so many examples today, really beautiful examples of people's personal experiences with nature or witnessing others' experience with nature, it can bring you back to that value system where you really want to walk lightly, so lightly that you don't want to even walk on, the worms beneath your feet, just being conscious of it, of the harm we do just by our very existence. But it is so contagious. And if we can change that value system, I think the other parts fall in place. I think building the structures to be in harmony with the earth, building our relationships so that they are in harmony with the earth. I think, my hope is that those are very contagious values once people taste them. They're very addictive. And so that future for me is one, learning the big lessons, but also, coming out of it just cleansed and clean and thinking about the struggle, but also the healing, becoming part of the healing process of the planet and of our own society. So that's my utopian vision.
Well, basically, my vision is of getting onto a path rather than arriving. Most utopias that I've read are profoundly unappealing, not to mention boring, and we're never going to be perfect.
No.
But we need to find a way to keep moving along a path of learning and developing that doesn't violate the limits of our planet. And I think a lot of that's going to be improvisation because we don't know what problems are going to come along. Mm-hmm. I mean, a good example, we can do a lot to improve public health. There's no guarantee that some new disease isn't going to pop up and we're going to have to deal with it differently. And it's something that poses new ethical problems. So my vision is of a world that continues to change and learn. That to me is part of the definition of being human. And therefore there will be mistakes. It will not be perfect. But there's some very deep questions that I think we need to answer. I think the structure of wage and employment and using that as a way of distributing the things that people need for their lives is actually stimulates pathological behavior. It turns needs that can be met into needs that refuse to be satiated. That's something about money, you know? I mean, you can't eat an infinite quantity of food on a given day, but you'd be delighted to have an infinite income coming in on a given day. So I think we need to uncouple the way in which society makes sure that everybody's basic needs are met from the logic that says we have to increase production every year and make more and more things and consume more and more things. I mean, we are on a treadmill, and we won't be able to manage the damage we've been doing unless we change this addictive, constant increase in consumption. And unless we can do that in a just and equitable way. So that's going to take quite a while. It's going to take quite a while to upgrade our educational system so that everyone feels they're making a contribution, instead of large numbers of people feeling that what they're doing is essentially meaningless in itself, but they want the income and need the income. And we pay the people that we force to do that very badly. So I think the thing that I would say about the world I hope for is that it's not perfect. It is not static. It is not fully predictable. There will be things to worry about. Actually, it's good for people to worry a little bit. But it will not be leading to irreversible destruction. And that we find a way to do that without creating vast additional miseries. So, is it a world that will be stable forever? We don't know that. We can't know that. But we will have learned how to deal with the issue of limits, I hope. And we will have learned how to think about equity to a degree that we haven't yet. And when we face problems, I think this is really critical, that we should face the problems that come up in the future with an understanding that we are all components in a larger, interconnected living system, and that the life of that system is what we want to protect.
In my ideal vision of the future, I imagine a world in which our culture, our people have recognized that the way forward is backwards. And I don't mean regression, but reconnection with the old ways of being that our ancestors knew so very well, of small communities and close-knit social ties and communing daily with the earth as a natural practice, a natural way of being, with our hands in the earth and our feet on the earth. In open sky, open spaces. A return to the wild in a way, and also simultaneously some connection to that wild within that is already here. It's not far, it's just that we are not valuing that wild within. That to be truly civilized is to be a wild creature, and that is civilized and natural. I imagine that world. And I also imagine a world where the key word of independence has been replaced by interdependence as a broad understanding, not in pockets of resistance where we see it now, but as a broad, natural way of being and way of talking and way of expressing. I imagine a world in which many more people, and perhaps all people, recognize that the causes of happiness are not external to us. That the causes of our freedom and our happiness lie within and are accessible, not out of reach, and not something that we have to orchestrate or manipulate through things, through our use of things. I imagine a world in which children grow up with that and grow up close to the natural world, grow up hiking in the woods as part of their education, who grow up meditating as part of their education, finding pause. I imagine that.
Thank you, Beth, for this question and for the clarification, and Susie calling for it as well, and hearing its call for all of us. I realize that it's a question I don't even allow myself to think about very much. I think, and in having it raised and having a conversation with Willa at lunch, I'm sort of finding a treasure trove within myself of how I have loved and dreamt the world earlier. And we were talking about being in Nepal, both of us, actually, some of it at the same time in the 80s. And how, and this is just one part of what happens there, but how the cultures lived in that incredible land in such a sacred dance, understanding the land as sacred and anointing it and reaching out to it in this very sensual way, really. everything is puja, everything is worship, and going through the day is to make these markings through the world of honoring what is alive and what is there. And I particularly was drawn to the ways that everything became a shrine in a way. The tree became a shrine, the cave became a temple, the mountain was crested by a stupa. It was just this constant interaction, dialogic interaction with the natural world, with this sacred world. And so I would love for that to be how we live on this earth, in that kind of dance, that kind of erotic dance, really. Understanding that there's just this life force in all of us, and that we are in balance, therefore, in our conversation with it. And it made me realize, in thinking about that this whole process of dialogic relating and listening, deep listening, is, for me, path. That if we do that, we have the gifts of community. We have the gifts of appreciating limits that arises naturally out of a dialogic exchange in which there is appreciation of another's view, and also the slowing that's involved in actually sitting truly in the practice of listening and being heard. So thank you for this opportunity to think about this sacred world in which we could live together dialogically. Our education process could be much more based on both of those kinds of things, being in the natural world with that kind of attention and care, and then listening to both the natural world and each other in a way that had deep respect in it, just as the norm. It's really helpful to remember.
I'm reminded that Plato thought that an ideal world would be ruled by the philosophers, which is about the worst idea in the history of humankind. So in my vision of the world, so when my granddaughter, say, is 88, she's 8 now, when she's 88, it's always 88, decision making is widely dispersed, and it's made in small groups that are very close to the people of that particular place and of that land. And the decisions are made in council, of course. But there's always a seat that's left for the earth. And the earth has the role of, it has veto power, it is the elder, it has the wisdom, it is the philosopher king in some ways. And the role of the earth is to, in any decision that's made, to be consulted as to, is this the way of the world? So that never again do small decision-making bodies make the mistake of designing a social system that doesn't in some way match the way the world actually does its work. So the earth reminds people again and again of certain kind of facts, and then all the decisions are made in the context of those facts. And one of those facts is that the earth would remind everyone there that the earth is finite. And so we find that in the decisions that are made are based on the virtues of restraint. There is restraint in childbearing. There is restraint in medicating. There is restraint in eating and consuming. And the other virtue, of course, is then, in a world that is finite, sharing and justice become very important. And sharing is a virtue, too, that guides the distribution of needs, the means for meeting people's needs. And the earth reminds these decision-making bodies that the earth is resilient. And so our effort should not be to depauperize the earth or to take from the earth, but in every exchange to have a kind of reciprocal exchange, so that what we take from the earth, we give back in terms of the restoration of its means of restoring itself and being resilient, so that we have plans, agriculture, education, reproduction, architecture that is restorative of the earth rather than just exploitative. The earth reminds everybody that, so I have a list down here, that diversity is a necessary condition for thriving. And so the decision-making councils are celebratory and nurturing of differences of all kinds, different kinds of believing, different ways of educating, different kind of reading, different kinds of arts, as in different kinds of forests and plants and so forth, knowing that the great imagination of the world and the great fecundity of the world comes from a multiplicity of points of view. And then, as I keep on going, the earth reminds everybody that the earth is beautiful. And so the decisions that are made are celebratory and grateful. The society has celebrations of gratitude, reminding itself all along that it is stunning to live in a world of such awesome beauty. Awesome understood like, yeah, that was an awesome basket. The really, really pinnacle of wonderful. And then the earth would remind everybody that it's vulnerable. It can be harmed, and it holds its hurts for a very long time. And so the decisions that are made are gentle decisions, and they are the kinds of decisions that would never even dream of doing irreversible harm. Always taking into account the healing properties of the earth and being careful not to surpass those. So lives are so Zoe will never know in her old age, seat backs in an upright position.
What? Say that again?
Seat backs in an upright position. She won't. There will be not international flying. There won't be that kind of thing. There'll be lots of things there aren't. There won't be mega mines. There won't be multinational corporations. But her life will be joyous, and when she comes to die, her death will be a joyous thing because she'll realize that it's in accordance with the way the world actually works, and that her death, as we have been saying, is part of that process.
So be it.
So say we all.
Well, when we pass through this transition, after it, every generation is going to be healthier. For one thing, if you take a vial of someone's blood, Zoe's blood, the concentration of toxins and PCBs is going to be less by the half-life and all the natural processes that are going to detoxify those things. And Zoe's children, half again and half again and half again, until eventually there will be human beings who actually have pure organic biochemistry again. The same for the water and the ocean and the forests. And I think it will be, 500 years of restoration. And restoration will be everybody's work. And most places will be restored, and a few will become shrines or monuments and lessons. And the stories will be written down there of what happened and why, and the rest of the world will be a testament to the lessons. I think most of the solutions are going to be really different place to place. They're going to be appropriate to the places that they fit, which means a proliferation of cultural diversity and diversity of food and architecture and art, and it will all fit the place. But coexisting, I think, right along with all that diversity will also be realization of oneness. And so there will be simultaneously incredible local decision making and entirely global decision making, and processes yet to be discovered that the UN process in Paris is sort of a poor mimic or an early progenitor of, to somehow link up those two scales so that the very local is always informed by the very global. And it will be okay that there's not international travel, because there'll be other forms of exchange, because these places can't be isolated anymore because they'll understand that they're part of a wholeness. So maybe people journey from place to place much more slowly, which is good because they see what's between here and there. The soil, generation by generation, will get built back up. And it won't be hard. A lot of it is just going to be by virtue of the backing off of human beings. All these natural cycles will start turning in the way they're meant to turn. And so I don't think it will feel necessarily like hard work. I think it'll feel like an adventure. Yeah, I see lots of other fleeting images, but no words for now.
I always find this exercise intimidating. And I guess part of the reason for that for me is that I have a resistance to a utopia, something that I just can't make myself believe, something that doesn't feel gritty and real. And I have a resistance to using other people's words. I love how many different words you all have for this. And I'm sure I'm going to steal some of those ponies in my own. But it just feels, I don't want to just sound like a regurgitation of a lot of the stuff out there. So it's hard for me to articulate what I want to see. But I'm gonna try and I guess the place from which it came, the words that came, begin with a recent teaching I got from a body worker that I went to see for some backache, and she said, if I have somebody come in, I always, as a matter of fact, start with the feet. Why? Because if you don't stand right, nothing else higher up will work. So, in our current culture, we always start from the top. So I want to let's start with the feet. And I think even below that is what I heard many of you articulate too, which is the ground we stand on. I just want there to be a healthy enough, survivable enough, feasible enough ground to stand on to begin with. So I hope we make this transition sooner than, just eradicating so much of it that it's going to be a lot harder to make any of this that you all articulated happen. But in this future world, I see us standing and walking that ground on a daily basis, and as a place to begin from, whatever we do. I don't know how to say this differently, but being grounded. And I mean that both in a very literal sense and in the grounded sense of an initiated human being. You know, people who have gone to the edge of death, spiritual, psychospiritual death, and who have come to see the limits that you all talked about. So truly being grounded in the, you know, the only true physics of this planet and biology of this planet. And then, you know, going up from our feet and our standing and being grounded and walking a lot more than we all do now, as opposed to sitting and driving forever. Oh my God, I hate it so much. So from that, being again in our bodies and using it, you know, it being alive and well for a lot longer than so many of our bodies currently are, because we're just sitting people, sedated, sedative people that we've become. So being active in our own bodies, in our life shell, and using our hands again and having those hands know the practicalities of doing things, from growing our food to building something to, you know, knowing how to cook meals and to heal with hands, because maybe all that plastic medicine is not going to survive our current system. So having other means again of being in touch with each other, and you know, and then comes the gut, knowing things from our gut before we engage much higher up, and processing that through our hearts before we process it in our brains. And I don't mean it's an either or, but we so are shut down currently from everything that lives below. And so it coming again in this form, or in that movement through our beings. One of the things that I just want to throw out, because I think this, you know, this is, in general for me, this feels like a much more feminine, erotic way, as you said it, of being on the planet. And it reminded me of a psychologist named Glenn Slater, who basically has said that our current world is as mad as it is because it has essentially exiled the archetype of Eros from the world. And it makes a lot of sense. So I feel maybe because of, you know, the often essentialized ways of women being more body and feeling and whatever, gut-oriented, that somehow maybe it is our charge, our women's charge, to bring that back in the world, and to carry that with pride. You know, I want to see us women walk again tall. Not having embodied this lower status anymore, but walking tall again. And not over, not, you know, any of the stuff that you mentioned earlier, but not smaller, not one bit smaller either. And I guess I want to just end by saying that I've learned something really amazing from Carol in her dissertation. Every one of her chapters that is sort of following the archetype of the death rebirth process, of a transformative process, she writes in every chapter a section about the skills and capacity needed to make it through the particular phases of that transformative process. And what she's learned in that is that the skills we need to make it through any one of these phases are the skills that we would love to have. As in, like, you know, when we are, in the end, that wonderful human being, sapiens, Homo sapiens, that we might be. So at some point, we ought to read this list that you just all named back to us and assume it's already here. that, what you just said, learning, celebrating, gratitude, that is what will get us to the world. It's not, it will then all of a sudden show up at the end of some other work that we, with some other skills, we'll have to, practice until then. No, it's this list that will get us there. And I think knowing that, I think is a phenomenal resource.
I think we would want to go around one more time, and if people could just speak succinctly any other things that have arisen as we've done this. We'd like to, just be ready to move to the last question in about 10 or 15 minutes. Would somebody like to start? Or Camille, you could just start again.
I'm excited for this place. When can I move in?
Right now.
I don't know. When I hear it like this, I feel like we're closer than we think, and it's not to say it will be easy, but it's closer than we think. And earlier we asked the question, what kind of made me think, what keeps us going? Why do we keep doing, or what is the necessary part of this work? Is because I want to live to see that. I want to live to say, yes, now I can go.
I love Zoe being 88. So that makes Sean 77. My little guy. I won't be around to see much of it. We had a really interesting conversation in the van coming back about green burial. This idea of having your remains put in a special suit and detoxified and planted with seeds for either a fruit-bearing tree or some tree that replenishes the earth. So, one of the things I'll take away from this meeting is, what is it I can give Sean now when he's 7, so that when he's 77, he'll be one of the ones who can carry us forward toward a place of peace. He's not being socialized by the culture to which he's being exposed to do that. It's just a question.
I'm not sure I have a lot of things written down, but I'm just in sense of trying to be brief, keep things moving. I want to go back to this term utopia because I think it means so many different things to so many different people, and I would define it is particularly based on, after hearing what all of you have said, that it's not where we want to be, but it really is the dream and the values we need to get there. And so many of you have talked about dreams, and we all know the power of dreams, both dreams of the past and dreams of the future. And that's the healing, the beginning, is the dreaming of the future. And the values are our desire. Yes, as Susie says, as women, we want to restore, that powerful word of restoring the planet and making it beautiful again, I just get really excited to hear the optimism and the dreaming. That's what drives us as a species, isn't it?
There are times, I guess we all have, when we just look around us with total astonishment and wonder. And I think we need to live out of that and think about the ways in which people's capacity for wonder is extinguished, punished, distorted, and exploited, of course, for profit. To look at the world and know that it's not a question of owning it, or selling it, or marketing it, but that the beauty there is available to everyone and entirely interwoven in itself, so that we're part of it. So I'm not sure we're looking for a world in which everybody's always contented. I think with that level of excitement, we'll be inspired to do new things, to create beauty, to get to know more people, to connect in deeper ways. And to me, that would be a world full of gratitude. And at the moment, we live in a world that's full of envy and resentment, a sort of formless resentment that somebody else is getting something we're not getting, instead of a world of rejoicing at what is available to all of us. And again, there will be problems too, but there will be experiences of healing and experiences of coming to terms with death. That's not going to go away. But I think the whole question of problem solving can be reframed in relation to hope and gratitude and wonder at what is there in spite of all that we've done.
I'm just very grateful right now myself for like another whole window from which to see and move toward in having this question asked. I had in my mind to mention a phrase from the interview I think I sent to everyone from Terry Tempest Williams, where she says, living in these challenging times, what's needed is silence, imagination, and direct action. And I've been circulating that as part of our our work at Clark, just beginning to put that out. And I'm very comfortable with the silence part. I mean, that's where I go because I need to go there. And much less oriented toward the imagination part. More about getting with what's real and what's happening and being with it, not hiding, letting it change me. But I think I had an imagination deficit. So, and really timely because, hello, I think that should be a part of what we are really focused on for working with students. And this is just the moment to bring that in much more strongly. So I'm very grateful.
So, holy cats. I mean, this group has just made this immense transformation, or maybe you've all seen it coming. I did not see it coming. They say, a good book is going to be one where the ending is absolutely unforeseeable and inevitable, and I suppose that's maybe where we are. But this total transformation from seeing this vision of a healed world, seeing it as something that will happen after the great turning or this marvelous transformation or in 80 years when our grandchildren are elders, but being invited now to see that as a way of life that we have absolute access to, each one of us individually. And as a vision, not necessarily for 80 years in the future, but for a vision of what I'm going to try to make happen starting now. And thank you for that. Everybody already had that one? I didn't get that.
You didn't get the memo?
And then after we do some sort of progress on that one, it can become a vision for what we might create in our place, which you have already been doing for so many years. So I'm pretty excited about this, and I'm with Camille. I mean, when can I go there? And I guess the answer is today. Here we go. It's cool.
Yeah, that's the same thread I wanted to pull out. And I see it actually woven through our whole 2 days, where yesterday for me was about the insight that our disconnection is the explanation for our troubles. And then it was only just this morning, but it seems like a long time ago, that being connected may well be our natural state, and that our solution is maybe as simple as being who we really are meant to be. And then in this round, the crystallization that Susie started and that Kathy just restated so well, but just that the way to get where we want to be is to begin to be the way people will be where we want to be. And that we can do that now.
So my vision is that at the end of my life, which is not all that far away, I will be a proud member of Homo sapiens sapiens. Because we do all this. We live from this place.
So say we all.
So say we all.
Well, I think based on all of your brilliance that we just said, that the question we should be asking is, in this future world that we're imagining, when there's councils of wise women, what are they doing? And then we should be doing whatever those councils would be doing.
Right.
So I don't know what that is yet, but I'm pretty sure that's the right question. But I think that it might mean we're doing things that are very localized and appropriate to our contexts, so our ecologies and our institutions, that we're pausing a heck of a lot and in the dirt and in the open air. And I wonder if we're also proliferating, so as many of you already are, spawning other circles. When I was talking about my vision into this future time, I said I didn't understand how, but there was some linkage between these very local places and global governance. Maybe it's done through networks of wise women. And I think this circle maybe doesn't have enough diversity yet to really embody all that wisdom. Even within the United States, there's experiences that are missing, and then, we know China and India are so pivotal, and so to think really big, it would lead me towards mycelia branching.
These are all really exciting ideas, and I'd love to explore them. Let me call attention to the fact that already, people ask for deliverables, and maybe we're to the point of deliverables, but there are the intangibles that we're already accomplishing, and I just don't want them to be lost. And when your words are, we want to do something that's impactful, mutually empowering, and broadly beneficial, it seems to me that we are doing that in so many ways now, and that we can only go forward and do more. So I'm all with this. And I also am very much in favor of preaching to the choir for the reasons you mentioned, because the choir gets tired and they need to be roused up, because the choir is hypocritical and need to be reminded, but mostly because so often the choir has not got the words to the song. And providing the words to the song for people who are so eager to sing is a really important thing to do. So preaching to the choir gives them the articulacy, gives them the words to express what they feel so strongly. And I think that's one thing that we can do. So I really like the combination of ideas here, the notion that we could do a monthly or biweekly blog in some sort of thing, and that it would be, here's a really hard question, and here is what's the word? Not a dialogue, because that's only 2, but we've got 10, a decalogue. There we go. Here's a decalogue of people responding to that question in ways that might be helpful to you. That's already pretty much done. So there's lots of exciting things, and the material that's been gathered here, I think, is going to be rich, rich, rich.
Yeah, I want to second what you said about how much is going on already in this group. It's interesting to see, I wonder if this is a woman's thing, how we don't really know that or something. I mean, we don't fully acknowledge how much exchange and mutual support and collaboration has been going on in this group already. And I try to make sure people know about it, but I think there are secret ones too, or not secret, just hidden a little bit or didn't get kind of fully articulated. But this group is in many ways in exchange in different, and it's kind of wonderful because it is very organic and therefore very real, as it has unfolded. So then I thought, as we talked about all of these things, that we're going to have to figure out a web of support for making everything happen, which we've had some of. And, I think some of this can happen very naturally in the way that I'm already set up. But we may or may not want to think about whether we are an entity of some kind that is supportable in some way. I like things that aren't too official. What were we talking about? The institution and how it becomes inertia. And
So the more feral we can be, the better.
I would like to see on this website a collection of all the resources that Sarah and others too have been sharing with us, links to articles, books, book titles, talks, videos online, to have all of those collected in some space on the website called resources would be just wonderful. I mean, just wonderful, useful, and useful. The other thing that came to my mind is I would offer to do some Earth Meditations podcasts if that was appropriate for such a website. Guided meditations for bringing us closer to the Earth.
We haven't all attended or been captured by the same moments, but we're all taking away a treasure, right? For years when I went to conferences and I watched people dicker and hesitate and kind of take a while to warm up and all that, and I'd think, you know, we keep them here for 4 days or a week if we're really lucky, and a group of people learn to talk to each other, and they have developed a skill, and that skill can be mined further, right? And that's really why I would like to see it continue in a form that was a multi-party conversation rather than a lot of very separate things. And, you know, people dip in and dip out, and there's a lot of this going on now. But the point is, a lot of it is going on between complete strangers, and we're no longer complete strangers. And if we speak to each other, knowing that we're doing it in public, I think we can get a lot said. We can work through issues and find the resonances, and we'll never agree perfectly, but every time we go around this circle, there's a pattern of echoes that amplifies in interesting ways. So that's why I wanted to leap in at that moment, out of order. Which we can do occasionally.
I don't have much to add, except I think all these ideas are great. You know, we're talking about these refugia groups, which I imagine forming around these kind of councils to start. So I'd like to see the seeds spread. And how, I know it's done in incremental ways, the way we've all described this. But you know, there's passive and active ways of doing that. But like if there is a speaker series, it's a great way to try to introduce that to people with examples or short clips or whatever. But there's got to be other ways to, I don't want to say advertise because it sounds so, yeah, teach, but actually just make people aware, more aware of this in a sort of a more active way. And I know my own experience talking to people about this, and I've been totally confidential just telling about my experience. It really piques their interest. So a lot of it's just one-on-one, even with people I just see at meetings that I don't see very often, people that, you know, that are, you just can read people, you know, if they're looking to talk to someone about some of this stuff. I think that's important for all of us to try to do. You may all be doing it already. I just wanted to reiterate it as sort of a fuzzy gray zone thing to do, but I think can be very effective.
Connecting.
I have a question. I don't know enough about American history, and maybe one of you here does. How did the Underground Railroad grow?
Out of
The
the
Underground Railroad.
Quaker church, it's not a church, but out of the Quaker meetings. It was a
Okay.
Quaker, one of my ancestors had a station on the Underground Railroad.
So, all this talking about seeding and whatever, connecting in the way we do just made me think, I don't know, I can't get the activist out of me. So it's just, like, let's be more strategic about it,
And
right?
more
If-
subversive, you're saying.
And
right?
more subversive, of
Right,
course.
yeah.
And providing a home for people who are hungry. But, what you just said is it's the lesson we learn again and again, which is to just put a seed down without sort of, a caretaker, a gardener, watering and fertilizer. It does not work. It just doesn't, it's a big hurdle, like you just said. When you start them all new, you have to like start from all over. So do we know other circles that are right now counseling about other things? Or Quakers already having a way of being in dialogue and silence with each other. Is it not an entry into, I don't know, I'm just asking the question, can we use other things that are already the mycelia underground, that we can water, so.
This is an idea in a little bit of a different direction, but on the same subversive revolutionary theme. I wonder about councils as a form of civil disobedience.
Say more.
Well, I don't have the vision yet of the right moment or place, but to the extent that there's a government process, a hearing, a corporate board meeting going on that is antithetical to the continuation of human life on Earth, 12 women showing up with their globe and their chairs and putting them down somewhere and not moving and then doing this process, as long as we could, it could be an interesting thing.
Wow.
I was just going to say that I think you had that idea for Paris, right?
Yes, right, you did.
Was it in front of, we were going to do it in front of Notre Dame? Why did I have that in my mind?
I just thought wherever the center of the demonstrations were, we could go there and do a council. It would be great, right?
Yeah.
Something I agree. I think it would be a powerful statement of how to be together in a different way. Yeah.
Don't throw it.
Well, just to build on that it doesn't have to be in Paris. It could be Central Park or your town square, or to just. I don't even think it has to be at a corporate meeting. Just start doing this. People say, "What are they doing?" And gather attention that way. So people say, "Yeah, I want to learn more about what you're doing. Where can I find out more about this?" Because then it's a movement.
So, I don't know, this conservative side of me comes up. We need to do that, and we need for there to be a way in which the process is done with care.
Exactly.
So there's a tension there. I see it with my students and the way we're having, and even the faculty, the way I'm kind of working with adaptation models of, it's kind of the quick and dirty council. We're not there yet, but I did reduce it to a 3-session, 3-hour sessions with my my sacred space class and with my staff. I did the student staff. We did a council before Christmas in 3 sessions of 3 hours, and that's very substantial for them. That gets them a long way, which is great. It's because it's very hard for us to get the faculty for 3 weekends. So we're now thinking about, can we do a 1-day council that does enough over the course of the day that something changes, something shifts. But when I think about what we get into if we start to really create a movement, what will the movement be, And it would have to be a key to a deeper experience, and it could be.
It would just have to be done really well. Yeah.
I'm hearing Bonnie. Oh, you're all grabbing for the ball, you know? I feel the same way because, I mean, it's wonderful how it's starting to, pop up all these ideas. So we've been talking about places, we've been talking about platforms, and I want to maybe throw in the notion of time. So we all know that there are some big events coming with some lead time. For example, an inauguration of a new president, which is, I don't know, some like 7 months or something from now.
No,
longer. Thank
Oh,
God.
it's 11
Yeah,
months.
you're right.
Please.
So, yeah, you're right. Anyway.
Every minute.
January 22nd, or whatever it is, 2017. So that gives us time, right, to think about, once we maybe know who the hell it will be, to have one of those online public conversations among the 12 of us about what does it mean to begin the presidency at this time, or something of that nature. Yeah, what should it, what could it, whatever, all of those things, right? And then make sure that Rebecca Solnit knows about it, and a few other people we might think of. But, we can sort of plan this in our heads, that we know this is coming, and we can ponder it. We can then be in virtual council to write with each other, to each other, about, whatever, in virtual dialogue about this. I don't know, just thinking of, using events that we know are coming. Sometimes it might be a spontaneous thing we didn't see coming, but some things we can plan for. So
This is a moment. Why don't you take one last comment?
Okay, this is just one more popcorn idea that's sort of unrelated, but it's sort of related. Is what about when you were talking about platforms? I was thinking, and I'm still thinking about the website, and then I was thinking, well, what if one of the pages of the website was a conference room, and we actually had scheduled every month, 12 months of the year, each month facilitated by one of us 12, a council for whoever wanted to sign up, who saw our website and thought, hey, I want to try that. I'd like to know what council is about. So that people actually get to try council via this website. And I just recently know this is possible because I've been having these Zoom conferences, and they're very clear. I mean, there's no problem. You can see everybody. So the technology is getting so much better, and you can have small meetings in which everyone speaks, and we could have some way of talking, passing the talking stick online. But how exciting that would be for someone that discovered our website, was excited by our idea, and could right then sign up to be in a council in 3 months or something, or maybe even the following month. And of course, that would only be however many people that was each year that could do that, but it's just an idea I got excited about briefly.
Time for transition. Any one word or any other thing that needs to happen? Yes?
Very short. I'm a strong believer that the people that use online conferencing and conferring effectively meet face-to-face at intervals. And that in itself proposes certain limits on size, needs for continuity, possibly needs for this group to meet once a year, something like that. So I think that's something to think about as we explore this modality.
Yes. There's a lot to think about, taking something that's really meant to be like this, because there is something about the way it's done that is very important to what happens. And yet,
when you were talking about the global and the local, Diana, I was thinking about the shifts that need to happen. And perhaps they involve our technology's miracles in some of those ways. I mean, Camille's a real expert in that, so. Okay,
May I
let's,
close out the meeting?
sure, of course, Kathy.
May I take 3 minutes? All right?
All right.
It's a tone meditation.
Beautiful.
And how it goes is that one person, and I'll take that role, is makes a tone, and I probably will have my eyes closed and invite you to do the same. Then with that tone in the air, in the circle, then I would invite the rest of you to respond in some way to that tone. You might want to match it, you might want to do an octave, you might want to do a chord, you might want to do some dissonance, you might want to put a pulse to it, whatever you want, so that we fill this space with responses to one another. And then I'll change the tone without really indicating that, and then the idea would be that you would respond to the change. And we'd do this for 3 minutes, and that's a long time to sustain this. Is that all clear? Do you want to do it?
Yes.
Okay.